Collectors Club.
Big Hairy Summer.
Well, hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to Bigfoot Collectors Club, the show where we talk to amazing guests about their personal paranormal history and share stories of high strangeness. I'm your host, Michael McMillan. With me always is your other host,
Bryce Johnson.
And our super producer,
Riley Bray.
Boys!
Here we are.
Oh, boys. We're back. We're back again. It's just your three BCC boys. We are here. The things that Bryce told me, Riley told me just before we started recording about what he read about us on Reddit are echoing in my brain and making me self-conscious.
Say it,
but
buddy.
I'm gonna
Don't read
power
the internet about yourself.
Through. Riley made the
Why did
mistake.
I tell you that moments before
I don't
recording?
know. I said,
don't know.
I don't want to look at that. And then you said, here's what else they said. And now it's all I can hear in my head. So
that's funny.
Thanks,
I took
Reddit.
it as a compliment. Oh, I guess you're going the other way with it.
Yeah, no one's nice on me.
It wasn't intended. It wasn't intended as a compliment.
The only people that are
Right.
nice to us are our friends, our Club Scouts over on our Instagram at Bigfoot Collectors Club or on our Patreon, BCC, The Other Side. Okay, those are the only people that are nice. Everybody else on the internet's pretty mean.
Reddit.
So don't check it out. Hi, guys. Hi, ladies. Hi, gentlemen. Hi, non-binary friends. We're down to the final few weeks of Big Hairy Summer here on the regular feed and over on BCC, The Other Side. If you've been enjoying the history of Bigfoot, please do check us out on The Other Side, where we are covering side stories from the Bigfoot timeline in our Sidetrack series. Also, huge news, if you're a Spotify listener, you can finally listen to Patreon podcasts over on Spotify. This has been a big feature that's been missing over there. We're very excited about that. So if you love Spotify, if that's how you listen to your shows, you've been holding out, maybe it's time to check us out over there. Also, while we're plugging stuff, summer's not over. We got a few weeks left, and we still have a few Big Hairy Summer tees left in our merch shop over at store.bigfootcollectorsclub.com. And by the way, if you're a Patreon member, you get 20% off merch. So something to think about when you're joining BCC The Other Side. Let's just, unless anybody have any Club Scout things we need to get to here, boys?
Oh no, this is the pressing matter at hand.
Part 3 of the history of Bigfoot.
Yeah, if there's
Before
no
we get started,
further objections from the audience.
yeah. Before we get started, Bryce, you mentioned last week on The Other Side that part 2 made you sad. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Oh, wait.
That the idea of, I think it was maybe specifically the part how he said where there's like, when there is a phenomenon or something happening in a community where like none of the experts, none of the real like scientific or serious people will take it seriously, then it leaves the door wide open for anybody to come in and just, either cannibalize the topic or run it for themselves. And honestly, and what we'll see eventually here is a lot of people end up just fighting over the thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like they've done in the UFO community and will be happening in the Bigfoot community as well. But I think we were talking about that, and he said, I got real sad.
How can you not get sad? It's one bad apple can sometimes spoil the bunch, but not with Bigfoot. And
Well,
we're not going to.
I think
the tomfoolery of a couple shenanigans, throw a monkey in my wrench.
Well, shenanigans are going to be at the center of this week's episode and this week's topic. All right,
Gotcha.
we're talking about the biggest thing that ever happened in Bigfoot history, I think. So things might get real exciting, then things might get real dark. But then I think you're going to come back, and I think you're going to come back swinging. I do.
Great.
And don't forget, at the end of this journey, whenever this ends, we still got to check in with Riley and find out how. I mean, let's just take your temp. Let's take your Bigfoot temp right now, Riley. After 2 episodes of the history of Bigfoot, where's your head at with the history of Bigfoot and the Bigfoot phenomenon overall?
I mean, I would say this is our most academic effort yet. So, applaud you on that one. Well researched, well written. We're really covering the topic. This is a good Bigfoot primer.
I think I've written more pages, and this and Roger Patterson did in his book that he released on the subject in 1966.
That may actually be accurate, yeah. And then as far as what you were just talking about with the Bozo the Iceman episode that you're referring to over on the other side, it's like, I think what made Bryce sad is sort of the corruptible hearts of men.
Yes.
Just how quickly the wonder turns to just like, fuck it, I got to get paid. And like, I think Bigfoot is a pretty good space for that sort of a fall from grace. So, I'm excited to see where we end up here.
And you kind of created a really great point that I don't specifically bring up in this episode, but also when you have normal, everyday people trying to run their own, investigations, you got to find money from somewhere. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You've got to get money from somewhere. And that's where Tom Slick came in the last episode. This rich, eccentric oil man. He's like, I got money. Let's put together a team. But he also didn't know what he was doing. So it's just a free-for-all in a lot of ways. But some greatness really comes out of all of that, right? Because it's all unregulated and wild. And so you get great stories. And then sometimes people kind of fall into something, as two people might have really fallen into something in this week's episode. So I say, let's get into it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, so as we head into the history of Bigfoot Part 3, I quickly realized that there was no way that we were ever going to catch up to modern day with this timeline. In fact, I had originally considered doing this whole thing as a 9-part series. But
oh my God.
Bryce almost quit the show when I pitched that to him last January.
Oh my God.
I was like, Bryce, all summer long, we're going to do the history of Bigfoot. And you were like, maybe not.
Like, I can't go over that again.
You found the line. This is Bryce's Bigfoot line is 9 consecutive episodes.
Michael doing all the work and me just going, and doing some simple horse math every now and then.
Yeah.
And that's
lots of room for horse math in this series. We got 9 episodes. You can.
Right,
I'll
great.
handle the research. You handle the horse math, Bryce. It'll be fine.
Well, put her there.
So I think what ended up happening organically is that this series is actually the history of what I might call the golden age of Bigfoot. And
Yes.
I hope that it has at least brought to light for some of our listeners just how the whole Bigfoot thing took off and what the events were in chronological order that kind of ultimately led to where we are today. Bigfoot Collectors Club is brought to you by Harry's. Bryce, why do you shave?
Well, I shave for a variety of reasons. One is to give my face that smooth feeling, which makes me just feel not so itchy. And then the reason number 2 is I'm starting to see those white hairs coming in on that scruff and that beard. So, zoop, time to go. Get a new razor.
That's funny because right now I'm shaving to make my beard, which I'm growing, look good and more shapely. And I actually have some white hairs coming in. But you know what? I'm going to rock it for now. We'll see. Maybe they'll color
it looks
them
good
later.
on you. And you still need a new blade to get under that neck a little bit.
Yeah,
just for a little cleanup job.
You got to clean up that neckline. No matter why you shave, Harry's has you covered for the best shave of your life at a price you'll love.
That's right, from their legendary high-quality razors to skin products like exfoliating face wash and hydrating lotion, Harry's gives you a premium shave without the premium price tag. Get better quality and a better price than those other razors when you get Harry's delivered where? Right to your door.
I'm very excited that Harry's is a sponsor because I got to tell you, Bryce, I'm actually a Harry's customer before this.
Yeah, me too.
I use a lot of their products. I really like them. And they sent me a little pack with the fine razor handle and blade. It's a really cool color. I got the orange handle blade, which I like because it's very Kubrickian. And then the foaming shave gel, got a little bit of that. I love it. I'm so excited. This is going to make my beard look good for the rest of the summer. A smooth shave shouldn't be rough on your wallet. Order your starter set today, a $13 value for only $3 at harrys.com/BCC.
Yeah, if you're like me, nothing makes you more upset than expensive razor blades. But I don't want to buy the cheap ones either. So, come on. This is where Harry's comes right in. This set is going to come with a 5-blade German-engineered razor, weighted handle, foaming shave gel, and a travel cover, and you can schedule delivery for your refills for as low as $2, half of what you pay for those other blades. There's no reason not to try Harry's.
I love that little razor cover that you put in your shave. Then you don't cut yourself when you're digging through your shave kit. It's
That's
perfect. Right. Also, great thing about them being delivered to your door, you don't have to ask someone to come unlock the lasers from the aisle. So
Did you say
the
lasers?
Worst. The lasers. Yeah, the razor. They use lasers to unlock the razors.
The laser razors. I know, that is so annoying. So you can skip that step altogether just by going to their website and using the code harrys.com/BCC.
Harry's has the highest customer satisfaction in the shaving industry, and they're still offering a no-risk trial to you, Club Scouts. Don't like your shave? No worries, it's on them. Get your best shave ever this summer with Harry's razors and skincare products. Get a $13 starter set for just $3 at harrys.com/BCC. That's harrys.com/BCC for a $3 starter set. So let's get into it. When we last left off, a furry, large-footed creature called Bigfoot had made headlines in 1958, 65 years ago, everybody. We're getting closer to that birthday. After giant tracks were discovered at the Wallace Company's logging site in Bluff Creek, California.
Bluff Creek. Applesauce?
Despite efforts from guys, I can't tell you, I have not had any rosé tonight, but let me tell you, during my research, could not keep the fridge stocked fast enough. Okay, I did.
Michael, you've been on a rosé tear this summer.
I'm a little rosé pig. Okay, rosé keeps the research fueled. All right, I'm also like Roswell, like Men in Black. I'm at my wit's end, so everyone just hang tight. So, despite efforts from Bigfoot researchers like John Green, Ray DeHinden, and Bob Titmus, our old friend, that taxidermist from Willow Creek, turning up proof of the elusive beast's existence was proving difficult. Even a group effort funded by rich eccentric oilman named Tom Slick, called the Pacific Northwest Expedition, which lasted months and ended in 1962, was fruitless. But something was about to happen that would solidify Bigfoot's status as an American icon, nay, global icon. He, or she, rather, would soon be a major movie star. It's time for The History of Bigfoot, Part 3, the Patterson Gimlin film. Once again, I just want to let everyone know some of the major references, primary sources for this series was Sasquatch, The Apes Among Us by John Green, Bigfoot, The Life and Times of a Legend by Joshua Blobus, and Abominable Science by Loxton and Prothero. On Saturday, October 6, 1962, just 4 years after Bigfoot made his big debut in Northern California, Tom Slick, the man behind multiple expeditions to Nepal to find the Abominable Snowman and bankroller of the ragtag Pacific Northwest Expedition to find Bigfoot, died in a plane crash. Slick had been returning home from a hunting trip in Canada when the wing to his plane snapped off in a violent wind shear. He died in Montana. All the evidence that he had collected from the expedition conducted by Canadian journalist and Sasquatch enthusiast John Green, California taxidermist Bob Titmus, Bigfoot hunter Renee DeHinden, and others, including plaster casts of tracks found near Bluff Creek, were stashed away in Slick's Texas estate somewhere and never saw the light of day.
Really?
What followed would be what John Green referred to as the quiet years, during which he fell out of touch with the Bigfoot stuff happening down in California. That lasted from 1963 to 1967. But it wasn't for a lack of activity. Bigfoot mischief was still happening around Willow Creek. In fact, it was happening quite a bit. Recent logging operations had opened up new areas along Bluff Creek, which seemed to provoke the monster. There were still eyewitness cases to be recorded and tracks to be investigated, but Bigfoot wasn't making any real big news in the same way that he had been. With Green, who believed Bigfoot was part of a species of undiscovered primate living in North America, and his fellow researcher, Renee DeHinden, absent from the field, new personalities were joining. the hunt in Northern California, Oregon, and Washington. Men like Sil McCoy, a man working for the forestry department around Bluff Creek, Al Hodgson, a general store owner who kept a display of Bigfoot plaster casts in his shop and would later go on to curate the China Flat Bigfoot Museum in Willow Creek, and Pat Graves, a road worker who had once been a skeptic but became part of the converted after seeing the tracks for himself. Another new member of the Bigfoot Collectors Club was a man named Roger Patterson. Patterson was a short, slight, but solidly built horse breeder and part-time rodeo rider from Yakima, Washington. He'd gotten seduced by the sweet siren call of Sasquatch after reading an article about William Rowe's encounter with a female specimen back in the mid-50s, as we discussed in part 1. Patterson had read the tale in True magazine in a piece written by regular contributor and Green's former colleague, Ivan T. Sanderson. Deciding to write a book of his own on the subject, Patterson made a trip out to Willow Creek in 1964. While exploring Bluff Creek with a companion, Patterson met Pat Graves, who brought the rodeo rider officially into the fold. Patterson later wrote about their meeting.
Throughout our conversation, we learned that he was definitely a believer in the existence of Bigfoot. He had seen hundreds of tracks, year after year, some of them on creek beds 30 or 40 miles back from any logging road.
Pat Graves tipped Patterson off about a logging location near Lerd Meadow Road, where fresh tracks had been discovered the day before. Patterson thanked him and, along with his buddy, headed over to the spot.
The creature had come down the mountain, crossed a road, gone down around an old logging landing, then over the bank into the brush, taking an average 52-inch stride. The prints were of enormous size, 17 inches long and 5 inches across the heel. I was so astonished I could only stare and try to picture the creature that had made these tracks only a day before. I believe that anyone who sees tracks like Rod and I saw will have to admit there would be no faking them. The imprint of each foot pressed into the ground an inch and a half, while our own tracks were barely visible. It was plain to see the foot was flexible as it stepped on small rocks as it traveled down the road. If a rock happened to be where the ball of the foot stepped where most weight was, it was smashed down into the hard road. Where rocks were up by the toes, the foot curled over them like a bare foot would do.
Patterson went on to meet John Green at home, in his home in Canada, in 1965 while he was doing research for his book, during which he informed Green about the tracks that he'd found along Lerd Meadow Road.
An experience like that can have a powerful effect on a person, and it certainly did on Roger.
Patterson was a full-time squatcher by 1966, hunting for Bigfoot in Mount St. Helens and other areas around rural Washington. In July of 19...
Can I just stop you there?
Yeah.
Think about what that would do, though, right? Like, you're out there, and you see these tracks for the first time, where even as he described, they were, making impressions that their boots alone couldn't make, and that they appeared to be flexible and improvised movements, not just from what you would think to be a standard wooden stomper, as they called it. He saw these tracks that look authentically biological to him. It was his aha moment of going, just where you see this and you're like, there's got to be something to this, all these reports.
I will say the thing that comes up again and again in all of these books, when you hear these dudes from back in the day, and yes, predominantly dudes, the thing that sold everybody on the existence of the creature was when they would see the tracks. They'd hear the stories, they'd hear the eyewitness accounts. And again, it was what Betty Allen from the Humboldt Times talked about. She said there was the confirmed and the converted. The confirmed were those people who thought there's an easy explanation for this. We just haven't realized what it is. And then there were the confirmed. And most people became confirmed after they saw the tracks. And yes, there were fake tracks out there, but it was the tracks that people could see where it was like, this is clearly a foot with like toe movement and something, and the depth seems to be the thing. And look, maybe these are people who are just trying to make their own case so they can sell their story. But I just kind of find it hard when you have a whole community and now you have outsiders coming into the community. And the thing that seems to convert everyone is looking at the actual tracks themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in July of 1966, Patterson investigated tracks that they discovered on a ranch in Woodland, Washington, which were similar to the original Bigfoot tracks from 1958, but more narrow. In late 1966, Patterson released his small press book, Do Abominable Snowmen Really Exist?, about his exploits in the field. The book, self-published under Patterson's Trailblazer Research Incorporated, didn't make much money, but it did establish Patterson as one of the players in the field. In February of 1967, Green and DeHinden, who at the time was breaking up with his wife, DeHinden, reunited for a tour through the PNW on a new Bigfoot quest. Nothing like an impending divorce to say, maybe we should go look for Bigfoot. What do you say, buddy? Are you busy?
Wow. Yeah, that checks out.
Yeah. So, on their way to and from Northern California, they stopped over at Patterson's home in Yakima. John Green described it like this.
He obviously had no money, and he was plainly a man given to obsessions. Not only about the Sasquatch, but about horses, health foods, and a couple of inventions he was promoting. He was certain that Sasquatches were human and must not be shot, and was deaf to any argument to the case.
And of course, John Green would have been saying, no, they're primates. We're talking about an ape here, not a human being. So I love the idea that even back then, everyone was debating whatever this thing was. By 1967, Patterson was battling Hodgkin's disease, an illness that would ultimately end his life 5 years later. But by then, Patterson would become one of the two biggest names in all of Bigfoot history. Meanwhile, Green and DeHinden's 1967 tour turned up a bevy of new activity. Something had been tossing equipment and knocking over culverts on logging sites in the new opened areas up Bluff Creek. Pat Graves told him that an entire trailer full of culverts had been tipped over and spilled in broad daylight. By the way, I just want to say, I know what a culvert is now because of our listeners who listened to the Dogman L-Files episode and someone misspelled or there was a typo of culver, and a lot of people wrote in and said, I think they meant culvert. It's like a like cement pipe, like a big circular pipe, like something that would be in like a drain or a gutter.
That is weird that like none of us knew that word our whole lives, and then it comes up twice.
Yeah.
But here we are.
Here we are. So an entire trailer of them had been tipped over and spilled in broad daylight. The crash had been heard by the loggers who, when they came upon the scene, saw large footprints leading up to the trailer and stopping where a creature might hoist something up and tip it over. Shortly after that, there had been hard rains and the area flooded, causing mudslides. The Bigfoot activity around the site ceased, leading some workers to speculate that the creature may have been buried alive in the mud. In August of 1967, Green and DeHinden caught the attention of Don Abbott, a cultural anthropologist from the British Columbia Museum. Abbott flew out to meet Green and DeHinden, who were investigating new, impressive tracks discovered on Blue Creek Mountain near Orleans, California. After studying the find, Abbott was convinced, here we go again, the tracks had been made by a very large, very heavy, unidentified animal and weren't manufactured by hand. Green noted,
It was the first time that a representative from any scientific institution had ever been sent to study the big tracks anywhere in North America.
Despite Abbott's measured conversion from skeptic to, hey, there might actually be something here, he was only a cultural anthropologist and couldn't convince the zoologists at the museum to take the case seriously. However, he had recommended to the museum's director that they officially investigate the Sasquatch, and had pitched management that they even hire Green and DeHinden to oversee the study. After a few lackluster years, it looked like Green and DeHinden might be turning over a new leaf, and some real scientific investigation into Bigfoot would start to take place.
Do you think this is like that scene in the movie where you're like, you come in, if you don't investigate this monkey, I'll put my forest badge right on that table, mister.
I think it was actually more like, so I'm sorry to interrupt, sir. I think there, I know these, I know that, just, if you would hear me out for just a moment, sir.
We're not looking into it.
I think it was more like that.
The latter seems more true to the subject, yeah.
Bigfoot Collectors Club is brought to you by Rocket Money. Have you guys ever discovered a subscription that you thought you had canceled or forgotten that you would even subscribe to in the first place. This happened to me. I had 2 different subscriptions to a sports package online, and I did not realize it. I was paying for it twice on 2 different credit cards, and Rocket Money discovered that I was doing this and canceled both of them for me because I wasn't using it. That was the stupid thing. I'd signed up twice somehow. It got renewed automatically, and I wasn't even using the service. And Rocket Money managed to cancel that subscription automatically for me. I didn't have to go to a website or anything. I just, with a click of the button, I was like, Rocket Money, please take care of this. And they did. Are subscriptions draining your wallet? The average person has around 12 paid subscriptions, and they might not even remember subscribing to half of those even. If you have no idea just how much you're spending each month, you need Rocket Money. It's this great app that tracks all of your expenses so you know exactly where your money is going. This is the cool thing about Rocket Money, too, that a lot of people don't realize. Like, it has an overview of everything you're spending your money on. So you can really have an overview of your entire financial situation. It's not just to cancel subscriptions and save you money, which you can do. This blew my mind when I found out, but did you know that over 80% of people have subscriptions that they've forgotten about? Seriously, think of how many free trials that you have subscribed to that you probably never canceled, and that's why I'm also such a big fan of Rocket Money. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills all in one place. Most people think that they're spending about $80 on their subs, when in reality, the number is closer to $200. When you're signed up for so many things like streaming services you used to watch, that you order to watch one show, or free trials for delivery that you don't use, it's so easy to lose track of what you're paying for. With Rocket Money, you can easily cancel the ones that you don't want with just the press of that little button. No more long hold times or annoying emails with customer service. Rocket Money does all the work for you. And Rocket Money can even negotiate to lower your bills for you by up to 20%. All you have to do is take a picture of your bill, and Rocket Money takes care of the rest. With over 3 million users and counting, Rocket Money customers have saved an average of $720 a year. That's a lot of fun stuff that you could be spending that money on. Stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and manage your money the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/BCC. That's rocketmoney.com/BCC. rocketmoney.com/BCC. Get it? I love it. Then, Roger Patterson and his partner Bob Gimlin announced they'd filmed Bigfoot in Bluff Creek, and all hell broke loose. Well, let me walk that back. The Patterson-Gimlin film, or PGF as it's known today, was more of a slow burn than an explosion. But it is, without a doubt, both, 1, the most iconic moment in Bigfoot history, and 2, the most debated piece of evidence in Bigfoot history.
Yeah.
It's been referred to as a Rorschach test. Upon viewing the film, the confirmed, those who believe that Bigfoot can be easily explained away by conventional means, see a man in a furry costume, while the converted see a female Sasquatch trekking along Bluff Creek while the filmmaker tries to keep up with his subject. Many hold this 24 feet of film to be the proof of Bigfoot's existence. Others claim it's a hoax. Others claim to have been part of the hoax. No proof for either side of the argument has ever been definitively presented.
Well, I think you know where I stand.
That's right. So, let's discuss the incident in Bluff Creek. On October 20th, 1967, in the forest near Louse Camp, where Bluff Creek and Notice Creek met, Patterson was out riding horses with his guide Bob Gimlin. The two men were in the middle of making a Bigfoot movie Patterson had begun shooting back in Yakima. They were looking for genuine Bigfoot tracks to film. Gimlin, who was a cattleman and skilled tracker of Apache descent, was originally hired by Patterson to play a Native American tracker in the movie. After hearing about the Blue Creek mountain tracks investigated by Green, DeHinden, and Abbott, the pair headed down to California to film the prints, only to find that they had been destroyed by rains. As Bob Gimlin put it, I had been 2 weeks off in between jobs, so we said, well, let's just stay down here a couple of weeks and see what we can come up with. It was early in the afternoon on the 20th when the two men rounded a bend in the creek and came upon a squatting female Sasquatch who had situated herself near a broken tree. It startled the horses, and according to Gimlin, that's when everything started happening. The horses started jumping around, raising the devil, and spooking this creature. Roger, well, his horse was rearing up, jumping around. He slid off him. They were about 60 to 80 feet from the creature. Patterson scrambled to grab his 16mm camera, which he'd rented for around $300. Gimlin took out his rifle. He claimed he never aimed it at the creature. He just held it at the ready and steadied the horses as the creature began to walk off, tossing a glaring look back at Patterson, who was able to steady the camera long enough to get some footage of the subject walking about 9 paces. Its head was very human, though considerably more slanted, with a large forehead and wide, broad nostrils. Its arms hung down almost to its knees when it walked. Its hair was 2 or 4 inches long, brown underneath, lighter on the top, and covering the entire body except for the face, around the nose, mouth, and the cheek. And it was a female. It had big, pendulous breasts. The creature passed behind a tree and back into the view of the camera lens. Patterson intended to follow the cryptid up into the woods, but that look back put him in his place. He told John Green,
You know how it is when the umpire tells you, one more word and you're out of the game? That's the way it felt.
According to John Green in his book, Sasquatch, the Apes Among Us, Patterson also managed to get up-close footage of the tracks on a second reel of film, which Green had only viewed once before it was seemingly lost. The lost footage, according to Green,
clearly show that when the men walked beside the tracks, their feet did not sink appreciably into the sand. The prints of the creature, on the other hand, sank about an inch deep, indicating tremendous weight.
Gimlin could only come close to replicating the depth by jumping off a nearby broken tree. The tracks, which Patterson and Gimlin hastily began to cast and preserve, measured 14 inches in length, 5.5 inches in width, with the ball measuring at 4 inches. Patterson and Gimlin rushed back to Willow Creek to send the film back to Patterson's brother-in-law up in Yakima, Al Diatley, who had bankrolled the trip down to California and had a 1/3 vested interest in the film project. They also stopped by the variety store and told Al Hodgson to contact Don Abbott at the museum up in BC. Tell him to send down some hounds and start a tracking team. We got to find this thing. They then headed back up to camp where they gathered their things. They also stopped to talk to Sil McCoy and told him what was going on. Then they ran back to the site to cover up the tracks from impending rain. And apparently it rained so hard that night that the creek flooded. Al Hodgson had given them some cardboard boxes to lay over the prints, but those got too wet, so they started stripping bark off the trees and laying bark over the tracks to try to keep them dry.
Yeah, as Bob Gimlin, I recalled, it was him that was like, we better cover those tracks, so thinking smart and on his feet. He was, smart to do that because those tracks had become sort of another piece of what I like to call triple verification of this phenomena. You had two men witnessing the same thing who captured it on film, and not only that, who were able to create casts of the trackway that this creature supposedly had left. So this is the holy grail of evidence, as far as I'm concerned. You have all three of these things, sort of a tri-verification.
The three being tracks, the film, and then what would be the third?
Eyewitness testimony by more than one person.
Great. Love it.
Man, losing the footage of the tracks is soul-crushing, though. Like, you have had the moment where, like, a take ends and you hit stop and it starts recording, but, I mean, losing that footage is so brutal.
And it's crazy because no one knows where the original reel of the Sasquatch is today. Like, many copies have been made, but no one really knows exactly where these... You'll find out. We won't get into the weeds of it, but, like, rights got split up. They basically sold Canadian rights to this person and European rights to this person, and they sliced up so much of the pie that everything kind of eventually got caught up in all this legal crap, and the reel ended up in a vault someplace from some like media company's warehouse. And it's kind of become, I mean, it would make a good Indiana Jones movie. Like if, there's a story there about tracking down the original print, right? And so the wherever that is, the second reel might also be. John Green knew that he saw it, though, but he only saw it once. And after that, he doesn't know what happened to it.
Huh.
Well, that's okay. They managed to save and preserve the real McCoy.
Yeah.
So that was the most important
better,
piece of
if you're going to
footage.
lose one of the reels, better to lose that one. I guess.
Oh my
Anyway.
God! If you only had the tracks,
You imagine the story on vice versa.
So much
I
worse.
shot the creature. I did. I swear. I can't find that reel though. But I had that. I did have that.
Meanwhile, back in Willow Creek, Al Hodgson called Don Abbott, the museum guy up in BC, but Abbott politely declined sending someone down to the site and a team of hounds and trackers. But he did contact the athlete in Yakima, that was Patterson's brother-in-law, to let him know that the museum would be very interested in showing the filmed results once developed. Abbott then called John Green, told him the news, who then in turn got a hold of Renee DeHinden. DeHinden sped down to Willow Creek to meet Patterson and Gimlin, but the two cowboys had already left for Washington by the time he got there. So he grabbed Jim McLaren, a Humboldt State College student and budding Bigfoot researcher, and they took off for Yakima. Jim McLaren is also, I think, the guy who sculpted, if you look at the China Flats Museum and there's a giant Bigfoot statue out there
the Omaha
carved,
statue.
that was Jim McLaren who was carving it during this time, I believe. I could be wrong about that, but he was carving Bigfoots, and there are a few carved Bigfoots. If you go to Willow Creek, you'll see them around town. News was already spreading fast. Mrs. Bigfoot is filmed. That story ran in the Humboldt Times-Standard. Surprisingly, columnist Andrew Gonzoli, who coined the term Bigfoot, see last episode, wasn't pleased with Patterson grabbing the spotlight and immediately brushed off the film as a scam before anyone had even seen it.
The abominable snowman has already become part of our local folklore and belongs to the strange realm of fantasy and fiction.
This episode is brought to you by DraftKings.
Bryce, can you believe that we've had 7 months without a single NFL game?
I know.
You know I miss my Kansas City Chiefs.
Shout out,
Well,
Mahomes.
guess what? Shout out, Mahomes. The wait is finally over. The NFL is back, baby. And DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, is giving you a can't-miss offer for Week 1. This week, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5 on any NFL game.
Jeez, DraftKings is hooking everyone up with game day greatness. All customers can take advantage of 2 new offers every single game day this September. Check the app to see what you get.
Download now and use code BCC to sign up. New customers can take home $200 in bonus bets instantly just for betting $5. That's code BCC only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. That's 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 plus age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. See dkng.com/football for eligibility. Terms and responsible gaming resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply.
So why the knee-jerk reaction, especially from someone like Gonzoli who, really helped bring the Bigfoot story to life? Well, now is probably a good time to sidebar about Patterson's reputation. Because from this point forward, a lot of people, including certain members among our own podcast, have very strong opinions about Patterson and the Patterson Gimlin film and all the men behind it. A lot of it comes down to whether Patterson was a trustworthy individual or not. I'm not saying I'm making this argument, but there are people who make this argument in this field, and were making this argument at the time.
Let's make sure we're all friends at the end of this episode.
Yeah. So a lot of it comes down to whether, like I said, Patterson was trustworthy. And Patterson, it seems, was known as a bit of a grifter. Even John Green, a defendant of Patterson and the film, described him as having a kind of used car salesman personality. Back in 2004, Greg Long interviewed family and friends of Patterson's over several years. According to Abominable Science by Daniel Loxton and Donald R. Prothero, interviews with members of Patterson's family, friends, and colleagues paint a picture of a highly artistic, small-town hustler with dreams of a big score. A stage acrobat, a carny, inventor, illustrator, Bigfoot sculptor, self-published Bigfoot author, and semi-pro rodeo rider, Patterson lived and breathed show business schemes. Now, I will say, as struggling artists ourselves, we know that being labeled as a big dreamer does not make you a criminal. And before you jump in here, Bryce, I just want to say, yes, Patterson had a lot of ideas. He was an inventor. He made several trips down to Hollywood to try to sell cart and pony rides to Knott's Farm in Disneyland, which failed. He was a toy maker who tried and failed to sell his inventions to toy companies. And he had been down in Hollywood in 1967, leading up to the Patterson Gimlin filming, to try to drum up funding for a Bigfoot movie. None of this makes him a quote-unquote bad guy. But it might make him desperate. Like Green,
you say hustler, I say hard worker.
There you go. Hold on. It's not your turn to talk yet. I'm going to give you the platform in just a moment. But I was going to say, like Green was quoted earlier in this episode, Patterson had no money and he was given to obsession. To a small community who had seen plenty of grifters come and go since the whole Bigfoot thing got started, some, like Ray Wallace, were even living among them, a guy like Patterson could come across as a little bit sketchy. And when you are claiming that you filmed Bigfoot, having a bit of an untrustworthy reputation does not help your case. But that doesn't necessarily mean you didn't film Bigfoot. The two are not mutually exclusive. But even Patterson's brother-in-law and business partner, Al Diatley, admitted, Roger certainly had the artistic talents. If he wanted to fake something, if he wanted to build a suit, he was probably artistic enough to do that. He was a deep thinker, so if he was gonna do that, he would definitely make it grainy. He'd jump it around, referring to the film. It was also suspicious that the female creature featured in the PFG mirrored the Sasquatch with the pendulous breasts that William Rowe reported back in 1957. That story was retold by Ivan T. Sanderson in True Magazine and featured a double-page spread illustration of a Bigfoot walking past a fallen tree that looks eerily similar to the famous footage. And those stories in True had captured Patterson's imagination and gotten him into Bigfoot in the first place. It's easy to understand why people might be skeptical about the validity of the film. But, like I stated earlier, no proof either way has ever been uncovered. The film remains a compelling mystery to this day. Now, Bryce, we aren't going to get too deep into the specific hoax stuff that people have come up with in the past in this episode, but I thought I would like to give you a moment to respond to the stuff about Patterson's reputation.
Look, we've all made mistakes.
We're all passionate people.
I think at around that time, in that place, a man who grew up, riding horses and working in the rodeo, a lot of these types of guys held down multiple jobs, And look, like us, he became absolutely fascinated with this subject. And I know how you kind of painted it as like, hey, Bob, we're filming this movie about Bigfoot, and when they happen to capture it, that's not true. It's true in a sense, but he was really putting together a documentary. And yes, he did use some of his friends, But when he got this hot tip, he hadn't planned on going up to Bluff Creek that week. As according to Bob Gimlin, he pretty much called him like the night before on a hot tip.
It was because of the Blue Creek mountain prints that Green and Hinton had found. This is all true. Everything you're saying true.
And he was absolutely hoping to. He really had no idea that he was going to capture the creature. He really wanted to just film those tracks for his documentary, not ever thinking that he was going to capture what he in fact captured.
If it really happened that way, yes,
right. If it really happened that way,
yeah.
But yeah. I mean, we'll get into it more later. I know, but in response to Roger Patterson's reputation, yeah, he might have been all those things, but like you said, that doesn't make him a hoaxer, because in order for Roger Patterson to be a hoaxer, that would have to make Bob Gimlin a hoaxer as well. Yep. And those two have never changed their story from, even though Roger Patterson passed away quite early in 1972, but Bob Gimlin has never changed his story. And both of those men did, in fact, take a lie detector test as to their, authenticate their experience. Both of them passed. And I've met Bob Gimlin. I've had the pleasure of sitting down and talking with that man twice. And I'll put it this way. I'm not willing to call him a liar. And, the words that come out of that man's rings true to me. And, in order for, so if, let's say, even if Bob Gimlin didn't know that Roger Patterson was going to pull that hoax, you'd have to paint him as a complete idiot, because those two were riding around that area for weeks when they captured that thing. And when they captured it, all hell broke loose. They didn't just stop and run back the film to the China Flats Museum. They followed that creature for 3/4 of a mile. They tried to until they lost the tracks. That's when they got back and started to figure out, okay, what's the next step? I've been on the Patterson Gimlin film site, and you're not going to bring someone out there just to hang out in a monkey suit and wait for us to roll on by and then, walk across that stream when we get here and try and escape from us. I don't think so. You know what I mean? Bob Gimlin and Roger Patterson were both very qualified horse riders. And so, yeah, it just, I could go on, but look, it is strange, right? A man's filming something. He wants to make a movie about Bigfoot. Lo and behold, he captures his quarry. And I just offer this. It's not the first time that it's happened. A lot of people setting out to make documentaries have found their prey. Think about some of the great, things where people do come across what they're looking for.
Well, and I find it, first of all, I want to clarify one thing. I wasn't saying he just grabbed Bob Gimlin. He hired Bob Gimlin because he needed a tracker. He needed a tracker to help him look for prints. He wasn't... Patterson
Bob
was not
had access to the horse. Bob had access to the horses and the horse. More importantly, the horse trailer. And so, Roger had come up early with the best way to comb that much territory is on horseback, and it was Bob Gimlin who had access to that equipment and horses.
So there's this thing that is in all of this that I find also funny, that just the very essence of wanting to film the thing or making a movie makes you suspicious, and it is sort of that idea of actors and filmmakers are untrustworthy people. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Just because you're going out to you're making a documentary to find the thing. Yes, there's motivation to find it if you don't find it. But listen, Bryce, you've made 3 seasons of a show so far where you haven't found the creature. No offense, but there is still subject in the journey, right? Mm-hmm, so
absolutely,
I just love this idea of people being skeptical of passionate artists. You know what I mean? That being said, you can still be kind of a dick, and you can still be kind of a dick and an artist. Obviously, we've learned, if nothing else, we've learned that in the past 10 years. And you can still be a dick and an artist and maybe actually find the thing that everyone else is looking for.
Yeah, and to get into just a little bit more of it, when I start to really question my thinking and I guess belief might be on the PGF film, and Bigfoot in general, I start to really think that it's that it's part of this under the umbrella of what we like to call as the phenomenon. It's not just a flesh and blood creature. This seeing Bigfoot in the woods by yourself or with a friend or capturing a photo of one is the same thing as seeing a UFO in a sense. You know what I mean? It's a high strangeness at its peak. And so to me, it only makes sense that, there's always something funny about when you
the trickster element is present.
The trickster element is present.
What I think you're trying to say
in this PGF film
is that maybe the Bigfoot phenomenon decided, it'd be funny. What if I do present myself to the guy that everyone thinks is a huckster?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that sounds outlandish, but you see it in the UFO phenomenon, you see it in the poltergeist phenomenon, and you see it in the cryptid phenomenon as well. So yes, the trickster archetype element is present, and in the form of who would the last person ever be able to actually get what he was hoping to look for? The money shot, the golden money shot, was Roger Patterson.
Riley, do you have something to add to this before we move on?
I mean, if you're making a nature documentary and you're looking for a snow leopard, let's say, you're going to put yourself in the situation and conditions to find the snow leopard, and it's going to take some time, and then, maybe you get lucky and you get that shot of the snow leopard. So it's, if you think about it that way, it doesn't invalidate the fact that they got the shot of Bigfoot, that they were trying to get a shot of Bigfoot.
Yes, exactly.
Well said.
You're not going to accidentally get that.
It's this idea of, I think that, and look, we're going off the rails here and we need to get back in, but there is this sort of maybe of that era, a shame in the idea of wanting something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if you want it, and you find it, then you're suspicious. If you didn't want it and it happened to you, then you were entitled for it to happen to you. You know what I mean? And that it was maybe a blessing or a curse if you didn't want it. You know what I mean? But if you wanted it and you got it, there's shame in that, especially if you try to capitalize on that want, right? So something to think about. I mean, we probably still are dealing with that today,
Yeah. Yep. Great point. Michael, did you know that your temperature at nighttime can have one of the greatest impacts on your sleep quality? That's right, buddy. If you're too hot or too cold, you're going to wake up. So I highly recommend you check out Miracle Made's bed sheets.
Oh.
Inspired by NASA, Michael, Miracle Made uses silver-infused fabrics and makes temperature-regulating bedding so you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night long and not disturb your lucid dreaming.
Bryce, I know Miracle Made sheets because I sleep in them.
What?
They're made with self-cooling properties for better quality sleep using silver-infused fabrics inspired by NASA. Miracle Made sheets are thermoregulating and designed to keep you at the perfect temperature all night long so you can lucid dream to your heart's content and manifest all of your deepest desires. And get better sleep every night.
You guys gotta try this in these hot summer nights and going in. With this climate change, you're gonna need these self-cooling sheets, guys.
Gonna need these sheets, guys.
Come on. Miracle Made sheets have some pretty awesome features. For example, they are self-cleaning. That's right. These sheets are infused with silver that prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, leaving them to stay cleaner and fresh 3 times longer than other sheets. No more gross odors. That's practically 100%. It's miracle science right in your bed sheets. What are you waiting for?
Yeah, that's great for your skin too, because sleeping on bacteria, that can clog your pores, causing breakouts and acne. Gross. Sleep clean with Miracle. Miracle Made sheets are also luxuriously comfortable without the high price tag of other luxury brands and feel as nice, if not nicer, than bed sheets used by some 5-star hotels. And mine are a really lovely shade of periwinkle.
Of course they are. Go to trymiracle.com/BCC to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo BCC at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels, guys. 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Come on!
Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com and use the code BCC to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. BCC to treat yourself.
That's amazing. Do it. Thank you. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode, and thank you for making silver-infused bed sheets. Woo!
So, Green, DeHinden, Don Abbott, and Jim McLaren all traveled to Yakima to watch the film with Patterson and Diatley. Interestingly, Bob Gimlin sat out on that initial viewing. Patterson had already viewed it with Diatley, and both were excited to unveil their big footage. Renee DeHinden said,
I knew what I was going to see. I had the things described often enough, but it still gave me a hell of a shock when I saw it.
In 24 feet of film that lasted less than 1 minute, the men saw a giant, hairy female figure with pendulous breasts moving across the frame and throwing a look back to camera with that umpire's gaze. John Green gave this surprising review.
It was a very exciting day, but for me, the film was somewhat anticlimactic. Just a dark, hairy creature, like a gorilla, but with longer, heavy legs, riding away. I had heard it described so often, it seemed quite familiar.
I had a little typo in that quote. I think it meant walking away, not riding away. But thank you. Thank you for covering me, Dr. Green. I mean, Mr. Green. Sorry, you're not a doctor.
Yes, of course.
I still respect you. I respect you as if you were a doctor. At one point, I thought you were a doctor. You're not a doctor. You're just a journalist from Canada, but I appreciate you. Patterson wanted to take off to New York and LA with the film, but Green and company persuaded him to first get some scientific feedback on the film to support his claim. They all feared Patterson would just be treated like a fish out of water in the big city. DeHinden specifically warned them that if they marched into New York, that they would be laughed out of town. So, instead, they first showed the film at the University of British Columbia.
It feels like such like a scene out of like a bad scene out of maybe like the film Midnight Cowboy. You know, John Voight walking through the city of New York with a Bigfoot film, and like Ratso Rizzo there. Now, Joe, we're gonna take this film to the right spot.
Well,
okay.
Well, in the subtext of that, right? You feel the other men being like, these guys are not ready for prime time, right?
No, right.
So,
hello, darkness, my old friend.
You hear John Green in Sasquatch Apes Among Us is so supportive of Patterson and so wants the film to be real, but you kind of hear him slip every now and then, like, yeah, he was kind of, like you could feel him being like, he's a little bit of a red flag. He's a little bit of a red flag. And we don't want to say, he's not ready for New York. Let's see if we can get the scientific community. It would be it would be like as if Mac Brazel, who found the Roswell remains, had been the one who went straight to the press about it. In which case, and he actually did. And they were like, this guy's crazy. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's always, you know what I mean? It's always someone in these rural areas. You need a middleman. You need a PR guy, and that's what they all knew, right? John Green said this about the Vancouver, the screenings at the University of BC.
The Vancouver showings, both for the university and museum, and for the press, were well received. Nobody was prepared to suggest that Roger and Bob had faked the film, and the depth of the footprints, which they had been made while they watched, established that the thing was far too heavy to be a man in a suit. If the film was fake, those footprints had to be fakes too, and Roger and Bob had to be involved.
Now, that doesn't mean that people weren't suspicious. Bob Titmus, in a letter to John Green, wrote,
By the end of the day, it became apparent that a few of the viewers felt that there was possibly a possibility that the whole thing was a very elaborate and expensive hoax. I felt the possibility was so extremely remote as to be almost non-existent.
Titmus and John McLaren set out to Bluff Creek to analyze the tracks and the location where the film had been shot. Even though 9 or 10 days had passed and it had rained, the tracks were well preserved and Titmus was able to make additional plaster casts. They looked natural and seemed to show a great deal of foot movement. He concluded that whatever made them had to be at least 700 or 800 pounds.
No amount of thinking and imagining on my part could conceive of a method by which these tracks could have been made fictitiously.
And
Right.
there's a really fun part of this, Bryce, I'm sure you're aware of this, where John Green got McLaren, the kid, who was 6'5", to go out and try to recreate the path of the Sasquatch, and they filmed it.
Right.
And then they overlaid the film on top of a copy of the original film. And at first they were like, okay, he wouldn't keep up. It doesn't measure up. But also, John McLaren's 6'5", so this beast had to be about 6'5". But later, further studies adjusted that and went, no, your horse math is off here. And actually, if you had filmed this with the correct measurements, because they did their best to recreate it, and they said it was hard because by that point the tracks were worn away and had been rolled over, and so they kind of had to guess. And I thought this was really interesting. That at one point John Green had to admit, yeah, you know what, this subject might have been shorter than 6'5", which discouraged him because everyone thought that Sasquatch were, 7 feet and up. But that rang a big bell for me because on Expedition Bigfoot, you guys went out there with the LiDAR, measured it, and figured out that this creature must have been about, 6'3"? And
Yeah.
And I remember I was like, aha, so Green's math was wrong, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't a Sasquatch, because as we now know, the size of a female Sasquatch would probably be closer to 6'3" than something like 7 foot if we're looking at primates in the wild and the female sizes compared to the male sizes.
Well, that's exactly right. And, I'd love to just go back and let our listeners hear that again. I was talking to my son in the car today, and he was like, he heard you on speakerphone and sort of us talking to each other about this episode. And, my kids and my wife, they like to make fun of me every now and then for the Bigfoot thing, and I love that. But I had to sort of highlight this point. I said, whether you think it's real or not, or fun or not, this is one of the most seen pieces of film evidence in the world, probably second behind only the Zapruder film. And people have been debating
I've seen
the
Star
size-
Wars more than I've seen either of these movies, but I think in terms of what you mean is in terms of poured over, analyzed, frame by frame, poked at.
That's right. Historical, supposed documented footage. There is none higher, and people have been trying to find the size of that creature ever since the film came out, and they've done it in a myriad of ways. Nobody has ever been able to say conclusively, what the size was. That is until on our show, Expedition Bigfoot, we went out there with LiDAR expert, and we LiDAR'd the actual Patterson Gimlin film site, and we're able to tell within a millimeter, the size of the subject in the film. Shout out to Doug for bringing his incredible LiDAR technology and equipment to that site. And yes, Michael, you're right. The subject in that film came out to be, without a doubt, definitively at 6 foot 3 inches tall, which at first glance you're probably like, oh, well, that could be a man in a uniform. And I say to you this, not Roger nor Bob nor the guy
a marching band uniform.
Yes, none of those
job
guys
is that uniform for?
were
I
6'3", and to your point, yes, when you realize that the subject is more than likely a female, that rings true, because in the larger primate morphology, for example, silverback gorillas are on average about 20 to 25% larger than their female counterparts. So it fits perfectly.
Okay. Bryce, Riley, and to myself, I think we have to, from this point forward, Bryce, thank you, withhold our further opinions of the film itself. And let's just get back to history and see. We're going to have a moment. We're going to have some time for our personal opinions about the movie. But I did think that was important because you have been out there and you've measured it, and it did come out to be shorter, and that's why I brought it up. And so it was kind of fun to watch what some people pointed to as a failure on John Green's part as actually a win for him.
And totally. And, And what I tried to do, so I realized poorly in your part too, was explain about how these men tried to sort of vindicate and validate just how deep those impressions were, because standing there on that sand, and even as it got wetter, you couldn't make that deep of impression. So, even their horses had left tracks, about that. So it was like, how are you gonna fake that? How can you fake that weight? And it's just something to think about.
I gotta warn you, there's gonna be more skeptics coming up in the rest of this story. So just hang tight and hold your convictions dear. What happened in the film in the immediate aftermath may surprise you. It didn't really take off. Patterson, Gimlin, and Diatley took the film to New York and LA, and sure enough, no one really cared about some monster footage from three yokels from rural Washington. Life magazine expressed interest until representatives from the American Museum of Natural History watched it and declared it to be a fake. British primatologist Dr. John Napier from the Smithsonian Institute was one of the first members of the scientific community to take the whole Bigfoot thing seriously, alongside Don Abbott. And after watching the film in early December of 1967, he was somewhat on the fence. He saw some issues with the anatomy of the creature. The sagittal crest and the upper torso of the creature looked consistent with large primates, but the lower half, it was all too human. But he couldn't see the zipper on the creature, meaning he couldn't see what was exactly fake about the thing. He's quoted as saying that the veracity of the film may depend on which speed it had been shot.
If the movie was filmed at 24 frames, then the creature's walk cannot be distinguished from a normal human walk. If it was filmed at 16 or 18 frames, there are a number of important respects in which it is quite unlike man's gait.
He thought it was likely...
I know we said we're not going to jump anywhere, but that is a really weirdly nonsensical take on the whole thing.
Well, hold on.
Because
Hold tight.
Okay.
Hold tight.
Okay.
He thought it was likely that Patterson would have used 24 frames because it is best suited to TV transmission, but conceded that his opinion was entirely speculative, Riley. Napier seemed to struggle with his position on the film over the next few years. He'd later say,
"There is little doubt that the scientific evidence taken collectively points to a hoax of some kind. The creature shown does not stand up well to functional analysis."
However, in his 1973 book, Bigfoot, the Yeti, and Sasquatch in Myth and Reality, Napier reaffirmed his place on the fence.
"There was nothing in the film which would prove conclusively that this was a hoax."
And there you have it, the PGF paradox. Now, Riley, what were you going to say about this film speed? I think he was trying to say that, like, film, if you look at it from one way, the film speed might slow down, and one way it might speed him up, and maybe that causes...
What he's saying doesn't make sense, because he's saying if you filmed it at a slower frame rate, which is less information, then it could somehow show more, which that doesn't make any sense.
Well, I
like
think
if you filmed it at a higher frame rate, you'd get more information, but to me that feels like when like a dude is trying to shut down a conversation and just sort of to like drop some technical jargon, but like he's actually in my opinion, using the technical jargon incorrectly.
Well,
and so it
clearly
just irks me.
Clearly, he was
Johnny
very
Bananas.
Clearly, he was very confused.
Bananas.
Johnny Bananas, Dr. John Napier, aka
Drops
Johnny
the ball
Bananas,
again.
MTV's Johnny Bananas, was very confused about this whole thing. And you know why? It's because he had just been kicked out of Rivals 3, and he was disappointed in his performance, and TJ Lavin was disappointed in him, so he was just not in the right headspace to look at the Patterson Gimlin film that day. No, but
and if you want to understand what Michael's talking about at all, then you should subscribe to The Other Side.
So, but John Napier obviously struggled. He was just like, I don't know what to make of this. There are things about it that bump me. There are things about it that don't bump me. One zoologist who was very excited about the film was Ivan T. Sanderson, the man who inspired Patterson in the first place. It was Sanderson who showed the film to Napier and others in an attempt to drum up interest for an article he wanted to write about it. In November of 1967, after Patterson and Diatley's newly formed company, Bigfoot Enterprises, had been turned away by multiple media outlets, Sanderson arranged for stills of the film to be published in Argosy magazine, accompanied by a story penned by Sanderson Sanderson himself. He also obtained the foreign rights to the film and made a deal with the BBC to make a documentary about it. Thus, in February of 1968, 4 months after being filmed, the iconic image of Bigfoot was published for public consumption for the very first time, and it captured the imagination of Argosy readers, so much so that the issue completely sold out in a print run of 1 million copies in 7 days. Later that year, Patterson finished his film, Bigfoot, the Abominable Snowman of America. He teamed up with film distributor Ron Olson, very briefly, from American National Enterprises, who taught Patterson about what were called four-wallers. This is very fun, if you'll indulge me here. Kind of important to know how these things were distributed at the time as well. So, the independent film market at the time was focused on rural areas. And what they would do was people would rent, they'd take a cheap movie that they hadn't spent a lot of money on. They would rent a theater or a space, which they called, and they'd rent all four walls, they would say, and call them four-wallers for a night or two, right? They would market the movie hard in local TV and on local newspapers, and get asses in and out of the theater before anyone knew that they had bought a ticket to a turd. And before anyone could say, hey, this movie sucks, they'd be on to the next town, repeating this process of like, anywhere we can show this movie, let's hype it up, pack the house, sell it, and move on to the next town. There was a way to market these movies that wasn't like it's going to get a national run, it's going to be rented out to all these main theaters. It was like down and dirty independent distribution, which is really kind of cool and really kind of fun.
It's the same model for touring in a shitty punk band.
There you go. So to prove his point, Olson rented a high school auditorium in Lakeview, Oregon, and showed Patterson's movie. The event sold great, and Patterson and Diatley went back to their motel with a trash can full of cash. They decided to ditch Olson and do it on their own. They made 32 prints of the movie and took it all across the U.S. during 1969, making a few $100,000 along the way. Not bad for a couple yokels out of Yakima. Conspicuously absent from most of it was Bob Gimlin. As Green noted,
as a result of one disagreement, Bob Gimlin was cut out for several years from any participation of the profits, and that it is worth reflecting on whether Roger would have dared to let that situation develop if the film were a fake.
Maybe. Or maybe Roger was just being Roger. Another individual who felt took by Patterson was Sanderson, who never got his commission from Patterson for the BBC documentary. In a letter to his lit agent, he wrote,
I may be no judge of character, but my wife Alma is, and the rest of us are not idiots. All of us thought Roger Patterson was both a sincere and honest citizen. However, he took a powder on me the minute I got his bloody documentary made for him, and he has neither paid me my commission nor answered any of my letters since. He only owes me $75.
Look, he's just a man who doesn't return emails. Like, come on, we've all been there. Fuck.
John Kirk, president of British Columbia's Scientific Cryptozoology Club and defender of Patterson, told author Daniel Loxton in 2004,
Patterson, he's no angel. There's no question about that. This guy was a slapdash kind of guy that you really shouldn't have done business with.
1969 was the year that also saw the publication of John Green's first book, On the Track of Sasquatch. He and DeHinden had bought the Canadian rights to Patterson's film, and Green and DeHinden toured it across Canada, which did great for Green's book sales as well. Towards the end of 1969, the Bigfoot Roadshow had taken too much out of Patterson, who was fighting cancer, and Diatley, who was just burned out from being on the road. They finally sold the rights over to Olson, who did his best with the film, but just seemed to miss its moment. But that didn't mean that the PFG film or Bigfoot wouldn't go on to be a major box office draw, especially the big man himself. Roger Patterson's battle with cancer ended in 1972. Shortly before his death, Patterson allegedly told Peter Byrne, an author and Bigfoot researcher, that he wished he'd shot the creature and shown the body as proof instead of a reel of film. Though Patterson died, the PFG would guarantee his immortality, and it launched Bigfoot as a bona fide cultural sensation that saw its heyday in film, TV, toys, and merchandise throughout the 1970s. 1972 also saw the release of Bigfoot's first major motion picture success, a delightfully independent film, which is half documentary, half scripted thriller, meta before meta was a thing, called The Beast of Boggy Creek, based on encounters involving a Bigfoot-like creature lurking in Arkansas during the late 1960s and the early 1970s, called the Folk Monster. The creature grossed, I believe, $52 million. It was something wild. It may not have been 52 million. I think it was like 52 million in today's money. I have to go back and look at it, but it made bank. This
That's
movie
a lot
was
of money.
This movie was like one of the highest grossing films of 1972, and we've seen it. We covered this movie back on the other side years and years ago, and it's not great, but it made a shit ton of money. Maybe do a quick Googs. Let's find out how much. Go to the Wikipedia page and find out how much money it made. I'm pulling that fact out from my ass.
Here,
I'm doing some horse math on that one.
I remember
for
it
sure.
being pretty great
that
on
is some classic
Riley's
horse
projection
right there.
screen.
Yeah,
That
it was
was
fun.
awesome.
It's definitely
That was
fun.
a great night. Yeah.
The feature stood out from the rest of the low-fare, cheap thrill Bigfoot movies from the 1970s, all with titles like Bigfoot from 1970, The Creature from Black Lake, 1976, The Legend of Bigfoot, 1975, The Capture of Bigfoot, 1978. Most of all, we watched and discussed on the Patreon. Bigfoot also made appearances on hit TV shows like The $6 Million Man, played by none other than Andre the Giant, which spun some toys, action figures based on that design.
Is that not the suit that I wore in the secret footage that no one's ever seen?
There's secret footage that no one has ever seen, and allegedly Riley wore the Bigfoot costume from the $6 Million Man.
Yeah, he absolutely did. Yeah, the special effects guy who brought that costume.
He said it was. So
He said it was.
I believe him.
Okay, maybe
Another Bigfoot mystery.
Yeah, another Bigfoot mystery.
I know there is some questions there.
Did you get the box office returns on Legend of Boggy Creek?
Yeah, I did. So The Legend of Boggy Creek had a budget of $100,000, and by June 6, 1973, had made $337,000, and by the end of the 1973, had made $20 million.
Okay, so it did get up in the double-digit millions. Okay, so I was
$20 million.
I wasn't that close, but I wasn't far off. Okay, that makes me feel better.
Damn, that's like the original Blair Witch. That's incredible.
Yes, exactly.
$100,000 budget. They made $20 million in 1970s money.
Huge in today's returns. And that's why all these Bigfoot movies started pouring out in the 70s. And Olsen, the distributor that Patterson had worked with, he was like, I'm telling you, these Bigfoot movies are going to be big. And even though he reran and recut and redistributed the PGF, it did okay, but it just never did as big as something like The Beast of Boggy Creek. I think because, it's not a narrative film. It's not a narrative shot. It's a piece of nature, nature documentary filmmaking. It's not a thriller piece, Boggy Creek was scary. So the golden age of Bigfoot may have ended with the death of Roger Patterson, but there's no doubt that Bigfoot was only getting started. Next time on BCC, we'll discuss our personal thoughts on the Patterson Gimlin film. Bryce has already previewed some of his opinions. We're going to delve into the infamous Bob Hieronymus controversy, which we did not discuss in this episode, and there's plenty to chew on over there. And celebrate 65 years of Bigfoot superstardom in our final installment of the history of Bigfoot, live from Los Angeles.
There you go. Wow. Whoop, whoop.
All right.
Nice work, Michael. Well done.
Thank you very much.
Well told, sir.
We're about to land this whole big hairy summer, wrap up this story. And we want to hear from you. Leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app. If you drop one over on Apple Podcasts, we might read it on the air, like this one.
This is from Wild Fae, as in fairy. These are my people. Subject title. These are my people, even though they don't know it. Smiley face. The perfect blend of seriousness, levity, and tinfoil hatness. I am digging their content, learning so much, and look forward to every episode. 5 stars.
Thank you.
Oh, lovely. Thank
We
you.
do know we're
Lovely
your
Fae.
people, Wild Fae, and you are our people as well.
And hey, I got a message for those Redditors out there, all right? I'm cringe on purpose. I'm cringe on purpose, motherfuckers.
Should have never told you about
I'm
stumbling
cringe
upon
on
that.
purpose. It's fucking called irony, you assholes. Your generation doesn't know anything about it.
Oh no, we're fighting with Redditors. We've reached that stage of the podcast.
Hey guys, Bryce Johnson, I love you guys. Keep Redditing, whatever you need to do.
Well, I mean, I love you if you keep listening, but the cringe is it's corny on purpose, guys. It's called Bigfoot Collectors Club, okay?
Oh man, now I've given Michael insomnia. I'm sorry.
There's a Mickey Mouse element to it that's purposeful. Okay, that's all I'm trying to say.
I got two almost teenage kids. I get called cringed at least 3-4 times a day, so it's all good.
All right. Well, let's give a quick shout out to people that we truly love. These are recent members of BCC The Other Side. It's time for some Patreon shout outs. Jacob Stein.
Thank you, Jacob.
Kenneth Malam, Cosmeteer.
Thank you, Kenneth. Welcome.
Tyler Laska.
Thank you, Tyler.
Chris Uchiha, Cosmeteer.
Thanks, Chris. Welcome.
Tanner Browning.
Thanks, Tanner.
Carrie's Longest. This might be a typo. Carrie's Longest. It could also maybe not be a typo. If it's a typo,
thanks, Carrie.
I'll find out, and I'll thank you again next week, Carrie's Longest.
Thanks, Carrie's.
Susie O.
Thanks, Susie.
Arthurian Rose.
Many thanks.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm saying. People get creative. Sarah Sophia.
Thanks, Sarah.
And finally, Sheila Bray, Cosmeteer.
I know Sheila. Thank you. Welcome. Hi, Sheila.
Hi, Sheila.
Hey, Sheila.
Hey, Sheila, follow me on Instagram. The rest of you do that too. I'm at McMills.
Yeah. Hey, I got a little plug here. If you guys heard me talk about Expedition Bigfoot, well, that's great because guess what? Our new season 4 that you've all been waiting for that we filmed in Alaska is coming out on August 30th. That's right. Wednesday,
Bryce,
August 30th.
Yes. Guess what? That's the day this episode drops.
Oh, it's coming out today.
It's crazy.
So mark your DVD, DVRs. It's coming out on the Discovery Channel. That's where you will find it. 10 p.m. Discovery Channel tonight.
Today. Baby. Go watch it. You're going to get a lot of Bryce content today.
That.
It's your lucky day.
Season premiere, Expedition Bigfoot. Check it out.
Hey, I'm Peace Drone on Instagram. Watch Bryce's show. Come to our live show. That's all.
It's too late. It already happened.
Oh, well, come to our next one. This did already happen. It's August 30th.
We're going to have another live show. Come to that.
Just come to, just go to a live show. Leave your house.
Yeah, get out of your house. You're listening to too many podcasts. I mean, keep following us.
Well, there you go. Listen to the show. Really
All right, everyone. If we don't see you on the other side, we'll see you back here next Wednesday for an all-new episode of BCC. Until then, good night.
And go get regressed.
Hello, little bastards. I'm the Cringe Lord, and I'm not going anywhere.
Cringe Lord.
I'm the Cringe
Bigfoot
Lord.
Edge Lord.
Are you Bigfoot Edge Lord?
Bigfoot Collectors Club is executive produced by Michael McMillan, Riley Bray, and Bryce Johnson. Our show is engineered, produced, and scored by Riley Bray. Our theme song, Come Alone, is by Suneaters. Follow them on Spotify. Want more BCC? For exclusive full-length episodes every month and total access to The Other Side, check out patreon.com/Bigfoot Collectors Club.